Mr. Chair, I believe we have a quorum and it's 9:03.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the ConnectRVA 2045 Advisory Committee meeting. Again, this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube with our members participating remotely. Information regarding our statement and policy for virtual meetings is within the agenda packet. So we'll go ahead, since we have a quorum, and formalize that with attendance by roll call. Ms. Mueller, can you call out the attendance?
Yes, I sure can. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll start with Town of Ashland, Ms. Amos. Mr. Tucker. Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith. Ms. Benedict. Here. Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Kilduff. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas.
Here.
Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Mr. Yore.
Here.
Ms. Deemer. New Kent County, Ms. Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Pompey.
Here.
Mr. Howland. City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Here, Nicole.
Hi, good morning. Mr. Bridewell.
Here.
Ms. Erickson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge.
Yes, ma'am. Present.
RRTC, Ms. Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Del Ross. RMTA, Ms. Simmons. Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons. Mr. Ariel.
Here.
Right Finders, Ms. Tisdale. Mr. O'Keefe.
Here.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Sparks. VDOT, Ms. McAdory. Mr. Herman.
Here.
VCU, Mr. Leonard. And AACP, Mr. Johnson. Richmond Area Bicycling Association, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
RVA Rapid Transit, Mr. Campbell. Virginia Asian Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Tran. Senior Connections, Mr. Williams. Bike Walk RVA, Ms. Lockett Gordon. Port of Virginia, Ms. Nelson.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Southern Environmental Law Center, Mr. Pollard.
Here.
Virginians for High-Speed Rail, Mr. Plogger. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Duran. And Tri-Cities MPO, Mr. Swikowski.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for attending this morning. The agenda and agenda packet were distributed to members and posted online. Are there any changes by staff or members to the agenda as presented? Since we don't have any changes to the agenda, we'll move on to approval of the meeting summary from our last meeting on June 2nd. Does staff or any members of the committee have any changes they would like made to the meeting summary? So I'm not hearing any changes, so we'll consent to approval of the meeting summary as presented, and we'll move on to agenda item number 3, public comment period. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee?
We didn't have anyone join us this morning, Mr. Chair, and I did not receive any requests.
All right, since we don't have anyone joining us live and no written requests, we'll close the public comment period and move on to agenda item number 4, which is regarding programming. And I think staff will give us a presentation on the constrained list of projects and the constrained plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. So as we all know, you are all familiar with this graphics. We are in the tail end of task 4, which is the programming and which is the main fruit of long range transportation plan, which is to develop the constraint list of project. Today, we basically have 3 things in programming. The first is the public comments and review period, which ended on June 17th. We'll give you a review about that. And then we'll give you a recap of the constraint plan budget. Miles on our staff gave a detailed presentation about how the budget was developed last time, but we are going to give a very brief recap this morning as well. And then finally, the staff recommended constraint list of project, which we'll be asking for your approval as well. So let's start with the public comment period. It was a 16-day public comment period, which started June 2nd after the LRTP advisory committee meeting earlier this month and ended on June 17th, 16 days period. The total comments received was 150 comments. Our main commenting platform, which is the interactive wiki mapping software tool, we had 133 comments there, in which people can actually see the project and zoom in and out, and then actually click the project and give specific comment to that particular projects. We had at least 10 direct emails coming to myself, Nicole, or Chet about the plan. And then we had the blog post in which the Wikimap was linked in the ConnectRVA website, and we see 7 comments there. Total comments, 150 comments. So we also wanted to find out how many unique individuals commented in this process. So for Wikimaps, the only way to track how many individuals commented on it is to see the IP address. So, and it doesn't capture if the same person uses different devices. So if someone is using a computer and the next time using a cell phone, it might have different IP address, but we don't know if it's the same person or not. But just looking at the IP address, I think we had 44, I think 23 users, unique users commenting in Wikimaps. I think our the highest number of comments were provided by one individual was 44. So even though we have 133 comments, the comments were only made by 23 people. Altogether, we had 39 individuals or organizations which commented. The whole the comments as well as the constraint list was sent to you. So all the comments we received have been documented, and you probably had a chance to look at those as well. Comments can normally be summarized into 3 major categories: support on specific projects, and then I broadly tried to look at the percentage of the comments. So it was broadly like around 40%. And then opposition to specific projects was 44%. And then suggestions, generic comments or miscellaneous comments were 16%. So the general trend was the support was normally for the active transportation projects, park and ride projects, and transit projects. We also had some highway projects which got support. And then most of the opposition was to the widening projects which we received. The thing which we captured was there was no major support or opposition to any project. So if a highway project was had opposition, it probably would had opposition by two comments or 2 people. So neither the support nor the opposition was in a great quantity as we had received in the universe of projects. So basically saying that it didn't have a major impact in any of the universe of projects comments. And then there was some misinformation, I guess, distributed by advocacy agencies stating that some of the projects which we had already removed from the universe of projects which had received public opposition previously when it was in the universe of projects. Those projects are not in the constraint list of projects, but some misinformation was that these projects still exist. And we got a lot of comments on those projects as well, which are not actually in the constraint list. So that's the overview, overall review of the constraint list of projects, public comment period. We can, I think, review the constraint plan budget recap, and I'll ask Miles, because he developed this budget, to give the brief recap to the committee.
Sure, thank you, Sulab. So this is just a quick recap of what we've covered in depth over a couple different meetings with the advisory committee. But essentially, we have just under $20.5 billion in the total budget expected for the time period covered by the plan, so out to 2045. On the left-hand side, you can see where it comes from. Basically, $17.7 billion is coming from various VDOT programs, or federal funded as well. And then the 2.8 billion is coming from the DRPT side or GRTC side of things, so more transit-oriented funding. We split it into various pots, the programmatic, regional, and local, primarily based on the source of the funding and the limitations on its use and the historic performance. So the programmatic pot is basically administrative operations and maintenance of the existing system. So this is a big chunk off the top. It's over 50% of the budget goes straight to the programmatic pot. And then in the green, you have the projects pot, essentially is the way to look at it. And yes, to the question that just popped up in the chat, the CVTA funding is included in these revenues. The regional pot is the pot that we're working with for the more significant projects, generally those that have some sort of impact in the capacity of our overall system or are crossing jurisdictional boundaries. And then the local pot is the smaller pot. That's for smaller projects that are oriented towards only one locality generally. So these are more things like sidewalks or individual intersection improvements, bus replacements, things that are less significant in scope and are more oriented towards just one jurisdiction. So within that regional pot, we started with almost $6.2 billion. We had to remove the $670 million, which is already committed to regionally significant projects through the 6-year improvement plan. So that's already accounted for in the budget and removed, which left us just over $5.5 billion to develop the constrained plan, which is what was then divided based on the funding sources. So we looked at 4 broad categories, essentially flexible funding, active transportation funding, transit funding, and then CMAQ, which is air quality improvement funding, and tried to limit projects that could be used in those specific categories as well. So that's a very brief recap of the budget. I'm happy to answer any specific questions anyone has.
Miles, this is Dirana.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the one-on-one meetings with the locality, especially Richmond, was very helpful. And I don't want you to take lack of questions as being silent, but really just as understanding what you're saying already based on having talked to us. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I can talk about the staff recommended constraint list of projects. So we developed the draft constraint list of projects based on just staff recommended list last time. And that was presented to the LRTP advisory committee. That was sent to the LRTP advisory committee after the meeting on June 2nd. After that, we met individually with the project champions, the 9 localities, as well as GRTC individually to see their priorities and any concerns they had. And based on all our confirmation, we tweaked the staff recommended constraint list a little bit. So based on the new conversation, the rank 222 was the cutoff rank. So normally, still the constraint plan follows the projects which based on their scored rank. So if project is ranked higher, number one ranked project is in time band 1, and so forth, based on what the budget was for each time band. And then obviously there are some exceptions. A few projects were added in the constraint list, which was not in the universal projects. So these projects were reasonably significant projects, and we somehow had missed it earlier to add those in the universal projects. So even that means they were not scored, but they were kind of priority for the project champions. So we added those projects, basically made a swap of the projects which the champions had, and then we removed those projects, or those projects went to the committed list and then added those new projects. And then some projects beyond the cutoff rank were regrouped and swapped for the projects in the constraint plan based on the project champion's priority. So basically, if a project champion wanted one project which was outside the constraint plan in the vision plan, they could make a swap by taking out the projects which was already in the constraint plan with equal amount, and then put that project inside based on what was the priority for the locality or the project champion. So time band swap was normally done to use all funding sources. So if a transit project was in time band 1 and all the transit funds, we had already used them, and we had transit funds left in the second time band, we shifted to the second time band. Also to put the complementary projects in the same time band. So if road widening had northbound and southbound sections in two different projects, it would be logical to put them in the same time band. So a few projects were swapped based on this logic. And then finally, the projects which were removed from the constraint plan was projects which had strong opposition from the public or the project champion. Cumulative projects, if the first section is not in the constraint list, then we remove those projects, even though it scored better. If it's not a priority for the project champion, because we had a lot of projects which we couldn't fund. So if it's not a priority for the project champion, we basically take out that and put it into the vision list. So all BRT routes except Route 1 BRT was put in the vision list. And all enhanced transit route within those particular corridors are in the constraint plan. The logic was that we have to have the enhanced transit before the BRT comes into play, and we don't want to double count the cost, because if there's enhanced transit, there would be some improvements which I think would be used in the BRT as well. So we didn't have that cost estimates, neither did we had cost estimates for smaller increment of BRT, which makes more sense. So we had, based on the vision plan, we had the whole full-fledged BRTs in our universal projects. And I think a new study is required in which we have those different segments which we can put into the constraint plan, so that it's more logical that the whole corridor being BRT is not viable in one go. I think we have to have different sections going through. So if any project, any enhanced transit projects, we have even a talk of making that to a BRT, we can amend the LRTP anytime. And this was agreed by GRTC as well. So all bridge projects are in the constraint plan. They were not scored, but they have a different funding source, the state of good repair. So we had the budget to put all the bridge projects in the constraint plan based on the state of good repair budget. All but one active transportation project is in the constraint plan. The only one project, the James River Heritage Trail, it's still a concept level plan, and that's why it was put in the vision plan, I think, and makes sense to that. All park and ride projects are in the constraint plan. All transit projects except 4 BRT routes in the constraint plan. So 1 BRT route and then 5 enhanced transit routes are there in the constraint plan. Project not in the constraint plan are normally listed in the vision plan. So 1 active transportation project, all railway projects, because we didn't have the funding mechanism for those railway projects. All of them are in the vision list. All BRT routes except Route 1 BRT, which is in the vision constraint plan. And then all highway projects not in the constraint plan are in the vision plan. And there are some exceptions. So some projects were regrouped, like the Powhite Parkway, it basically had 6 sections. It was regrouped into 3 projects. So the previous 6 projects, since it's already been taken care by the regroup project, was removed. So enhanced transit route, if the BRT in the same corridor is in the constraint plan. So Route 1 enhanced is not even in the vision list because we already have the BRT in Route 1 all the way to Ashland in the constraint plan. So it doesn't make sense to already have a BRT in the same corridor and then have a enhanced transit route in the vision plan. So that's removed. And then projects which was opposed by project champions. We have 1 project and that was removed. So total projects in the universe of projects, as we had discussed earlier, 268 projects. And then projects in the committed list, which is basically the SIP, the draft SIP, which are not in the universe of projects, 53 projects. And then we added, as I mentioned earlier, 12 new projects, which were not in the universe of projects. So 4 highway projects, which were reasonably significant, were added. Transit projects, basically the 2 transfer station, one, the downtown transfer station, and the other one, the Southside Plaza transfer station, those were added. We had missed that in the previous list. And then we regrouped 3 projects, removed 6 and added 3 more because we regrouped those projects. And then finally, we added the reasonably significant projects which are likely to be funded or have already secured funding from those sources which we have not accounted for. So it cannot be smart scale, it cannot be RSTP CMAC, it cannot be CVTA local or CVTA regional funds. So anything other than that. So it could be revenue sharing, it could be funded by private developers, it could be cash proffers, things like that. So we had 3 projects which we asked localities and they provided us the list for those. So those projects, those are not taking any constraint plan budget. It's a different budget. It's from the other funds. So those projects were added as well. So altogether we have 276 projects in the constraint plan, 194 based on our constraint list, 16 state of good repair projects, 4 private local projects. So 1 project in the universe of project was actually already been committed by private local funds. So that's why instead of the 3 new projects, we're saying 4 private local projects. And then the committed list, which is basically the SIP list, which would be approved by the CTB sometime soon. I don't know the exact date, but it should be approved in June sometime. 62 projects, 9 of which was already there in the universe of projects. So we removed those from the constraint list to the committed list because they already had secured funding. And then we removed and regrouped 8 projects. So we have 49 projects in the vision list. So this looks at the breakdown of the projects by time band and what was the inflated cost and the budget which we had for each time band and the number of projects for each time band, as well as the breakdown of the different funds, the flexible funds, transit funds, active funds, and then CMAC or air quality funds. So as we can see, 62 projects in the committed list, 9 of which were in the universal projects, which was sifted there. And then 69 projects in time band 1, 65 in time band 2, 35 in time band 3, and 25 in time band 4. So altogether 194 in the constraint list. The SGR, we haven't put them in any time band. It's basically, we know that these projects have enough funding to be funded within the time period. And there would be other projects as well, local projects which would be funded by SGR, but these 16 projects are the bridges in NHS and are structurally deficient. So those are the priorities for the region. So they don't have any time band, but they use the SGR fund, which is outside the budget, which Miles had described. So this is a detailed breakdown of how much was available, how much did we spend in each category, and what was the surplus. So anything which was surplus in time band 1 went to time band 2, and so and then time band 2 it went to time band 3, and so forth. So we can see that after funding all the projects, we have just over $3 million left in the budget. So we used all our funding, which was the budget which we developed. So only $3 million left in the constraint plan. And then we have the private local projects, 4 projects, 1 in Chesterfield, 2 in Henrico, and 1 in Goochland. That's the total of the inflated cost. I think one project cost for one project is missing, so that you probably need to add that later on, but it's just $32 million, which is different from the budget we had. And then the projects in the vision list, we break it down by all the projects we scored, that is basically highway, transit, active transportation, and park and ride, because those are the projects we scored and we didn't have the budget to put in the constraint plan. So $2 billion based on 2020 dollars, and then we use 2030 as an inflated cost for inflated dollars for 2030. That was the inflated project cost we use for all the projects. So looking at that, $2.6 billion, that's the need, which we couldn't fund based on the budget we had for the constraint plan. And then there are 9 rail projects which we didn't score, and we were not provided budget because it's basically the state's purview to allocate rail related budget or funding. So altogether we have $1.37 billion looking at 2020 dollars and $1.75 billion looking at 2030 dollars. And then we broke the funding allocation by jurisdiction. As we can see, most of the funding went to Henrico and Chesterfield, suburban areas where most of the growth is happening, followed by Richmond, Hanover County, Goochland, New Kent, and Ashland. Charles City, only 0.4% of the budget is going to Charles City. We just have 1 project for Charles City, which is basically an active transportation project. Then we have the multi-jurisdictional project, which is basically the transit projects or the park and ride projects in which we haven't decided the actual spot of that project. So the 9%, and most of those 9% would be going to Richmond, Henrico, and to some extent Chesterfield as well. And again, if we look at the funding allocation by project type, highway is 84%, Active transportation is 3%, state of good repair is 5%, and park and ride is 1%. Transit is 7%. So as I mentioned earlier, we have all the park and ride projects in the constraint list. We have all the active transportation projects except one project in the constraint list, and we have all the 16 bridges which we prioritized in the constraint list. For transit, we only not have those 4 BRT projects, but we have all the other enhanced route as well as the transfer station. So it's basically the breakdown. We ran out of projects for park and ride and transit in the probably in the later time bands, and highway is getting 84% of all the funding. And again, the most needs was for the highway. So this is a need-based plan based on what projects we have and what was the needs as presented by the localities. We can only allocate based on those needs. And if you look at the vision plan, most of the projects are highway projects again. So even if we are spending 84% of all funding in highway, we still have $2 billion which are needed in highway as well. So yeah, I think that's all I have. The action which we are requesting is that the LRTP Advisory Committee, the ConnectRVA 2045, approves the draft constraint list of project as presented by RRTPO staff. So I would like to stop there, and if we have any questions or we need to have further discussion, I think that should be the right time now.
All right, do committee members have any questions or discussion topics for the rest of the committee or staff? Sulabh, I guess one question I have is, and you've met with all the sponsors and everyone so far, so they are all aware of these projects and any changes that have been made, correct?
Yeah. So we have accommodated all the changes or concern which the project champions had.
Good.
This is Tripp. I had a few questions. There's a lot of good work and good information in here, but you mentioned that there was some confusion among the public and I think others. Some of the way that this has been presented, I think, has been very difficult for people to follow. And among other things, could you just briefly say what are the main projects you said that have been dropped that people commented on?
So basically, we received public opposition in 3 widening projects. One was the Forest Hill Avenue widening. The other was Route 5 and other related routes in Eastern Henrico County. And then Route 6 widening in Goochland County. So none of those projects are in the constraint list.
Right. Okay. I thought that's what you had mentioned before. I just wanted to be sure. Because I do think it was hard for people to follow that from what was released to the public. And it might have been helpful just to have stated that. And I think I understood your explanation about the BRT. I'm sorry Ben Campbell can't be here today because I know he had a lot of questions and concerns about this at our last meeting, but it doesn't sound like there were any changes made to address those issues.
So based on our conversation with GRTC, we made one change. We put the Route 1 BRT,
right,
which is based on conversation with GRTC, that would be the most likely candidate which might have a BRT. And it's not going to be the full section from downtown Richmond to Ashland. It's going to be in phases, but still and we don't have the project breakdown as we have in highways. So we have sections for highways and projects are broken down based on those sections and the project cost goes down. But the only resources we have for the BRT project estimates is based on the transit vision plan phase 1, and they don't break down the transit BRT project in phases, which would be practical because we are not going to have a full-fledged BRT at one time. So it's going to be in phases. So let's say if we are extending the Pulse BRT to Sort Pump, it's going to be in phases. It's not going to be whole BRT through to Sort Pump at the same time. So that was the logic. Again, the BRT funding normally comes from FTA, which is not accounted. Some portion of it's come from FTA, which is not accounted in our budget because those are competitive funds. And based on our track record in the region, we only have received one funding of such sort, the Tiger funds for the Pulse BRT. So we haven't included any of those competitive funds which we think we can bring to the region. So in the constraint plan documentation, we'll write that if any of that the region will pursue these FTA funds, and if it's likely that any of these funds would come, we would amend the LRTP and put the BRT, any of the BRT in the constraint list. So as you know, the long range transportation plan is long range transportation plan. We have to develop this every 5 years. So as priorities change, so does the project list. So not all projects would be funded next 5 years, but there might be priorities which might change. So maybe we'll have an enhanced transit route in all these corridors and we'll be ready for the BRT. For the next plan, we can surely include those, but they are still in the vision plan, meaning that we are welcoming the BRT. It's just that it's not viable to put the constrained budget in the BRT as for now.
Well, and maybe I misunderstood, but isn't our relatively limited track record in attracting FTA money a reason that we should be putting more of our regional money in?
Well, that's a philosophical discussion. So it's
Okay.
still in the vision plan. So.
All right. I had one final just clarification. What were the 4 new regional highway projects that were added?
So the 4 regional highway projects which were added, which we missed, one was the I-90, I-64 and Oliville Road interchange modification in Goochland. So somehow that's a reasonably significant project we missed. And there was one project in Ashland, which was the priority for Ashland, as well as the board member from Ashland. So it's a extension project. We added that as well. We somehow had missed it in the previous round. And then the 2 other projects were transit projects, transfer station, one in,
Yeah, I got the 2 transit stations, but you said there were 4 regional highway projects in addition to transit.
Yeah, so the 2 projects I mentioned 2. The other 2 was the Magellan Parkway extension in Henrico, but those are not in the constraint list. It's already been, it already has secured private local funding, so we are not using any constraint plan budget. But if a project is significant, reasonably significant, we have to add that. Even though if it's not funded it's not in the constraint list, it's in the private funded list. So 2 sections of that Magellan Parkway extension in Henrico, those are the 2 new highway projects.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the draft constrained list of projects?
This is Todd from Henrico. I'll make the motion.
So we have a motion
I'll
from
second.
Todd. Who was the second?
John Leonard, second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. I would like to do a roll call for this vote. Ms. Mueller, could you lead us in that?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Town of Ashland, Ms. Amos.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Benedict.
Aye.
Hoachland County, Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Bidunas.
Aye.
Henrico County, Mr. Yor.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Chair Pompey.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge.
Aye.
GRTC, Ms. Torres. Okay. Ms. Robinson, would you like to cast a vote? I'll circle back to GRTC. Moving on, Plan RVA, Mr. Ariel.
Aye.
Right Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Aye.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Aye.
VDOT, Mr. Herman. VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Aye.
RABA, Mr. Burnley.
Aye.
Port of Virginia, Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Southern Environmental Law Center, Mr. Pollard.
No.
Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Duran.
Aye.
And Tri-Cities MPO, Mr. Swikowski.
Aye.
I'll circle back to GRTC. Is Ms. Torres with us? Ms. Robinson? And let's see, VDOT, Mr. Herman. Okay, I see a message from Adrian. I think she has some technical difficulties. Oh, it is not working. Okay, Adrian, if you just want to put your response in the chat, I'll take that. That concludes the roll call for this action item.
All right, so it sounds like the motion to approve the draft list of constrained projects has been approved, and thank you staff and members for all working on that particular part of the project. We'll go on to an update on task 5 evaluation. Staff, you want to lead us on that?
Yep. Thank you everybody for passing the motion on the constraint list of project. So now once we have the constraint list of project, it obviously has to go to the RRTPO policy board, which I'll be presenting on the July 1st meeting. But once the constraint list has been finalized, as per the regulations, we have to do the evaluation of the plan, which is the last phase before adoption in this LRTP process. So the first thing which we have to immediately do is the air quality conformity. So just to give you a background, the air quality conformity is a federal requirement that requires MPOs to ensure that the projects, when considered collectively, which would be the LRTP as well as the TIP, which is the Transportation Improvement Program, contribute to the air quality improvement goals as stated in the Clean Air Act's amendments of 1990. So Richmond Tri-Cities area was a maintenance area, which means that we were not doing good on the ozone based on the 1997 ozone national ambient air quality standards, and those are evaluated every certain years, I think 10 years or 9 years, and it was not doing good based on the 1997 standards, but in 2008 standards, which are more stringent, it was doing well, and we are well under the budget for ozone emissions, and that's why the 1997 criteria was revoked when the 2008 came out. And then that meant that we don't need to do any conformity analysis for our long range transportation plan. So we didn't do that for our initially for our 2040 long range transportation plan because we were in attainment. But again, there was a court case, and the determination was made that all areas which were non-attainment or maintenance previously, even though they are attainment now, would need to do a conformity analysis based on the 1997 standards. And then we did that once, I think a couple of years after the LRTP was adopted last time. We did the air quality conformity. And then again, there was EPA guidance that said that if the area is in attainment now, we don't need to do a regional emission analysis for that. So the conformity can be demonstrated without doing all the technical work. So we don't need to do the modeling, and which takes a lot of time this time. So all we need to do is have an interagency consultation meeting. We need to develop a list of projects, which we think the conformity list, which is basically all the projects in the constraint plan, the private local projects, as well as the projects in the transportation improvement plan for Richmond as well as Tri-Cities. So the area, it contains both Richmond and Tri-Cities. And then we need to have a 15-day public review period, which is required. So that's the diagram in the left. That's the Richmond Tri-Cities model area. And the highlighted region is the Richmond 8-hour ozone attainment area. Previously, it was 8-hour maintenance area. So we need to do analysis in the projects in only those areas. So it contains Richmond, Chesterfield, Hanover, Charles City, Ashland, obviously, and then Henrico, as well as the Tri-Cities region, Hopewell, Colonial Heights, Petersburg, and Prince William. So only projects within these areas needs to be listed in the conformity list. So I-64 widening, even though that impacts air quality, since it's outside the I-64 widening in New Kent, it's outside the attainment area, we don't need to evaluate that. So only projects within these areas would be evaluated. And then we'll have an interagency consultation work group meeting. The work group consists of all our TAC members from the localities which are inside the attainment area, and then also from the TAC members from Tri-Cities MPO. Then we have the regional bodies, obviously RRTPO, Tri-Cities MPO, GRTC, Right Finders, and then Petersburg Area Transit as well. From state, we have the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, BDOT, Environmental, as well as DRPT. And from the federal side, we have EPA, FTA, and as well as FSWA. So we have a schedule for the regional conformity assessment, which is kind of a schedule within a schedule in the LRTP. So now, since the LRTP Advisory Committee has approved the financially constrained plan, we go to the RRTPO Policy Board to get the approval of the constraint plan. And once they approve that, they authorize the TAC, the RRTPO TAC, to approve the draft regional conformity assessment for public review. And then on the 7th, we'll have interagency consultation meeting. The same day, we'll have the RRTPO TAC, which would approve the draft regional conformity assessment, which is being prepared by VDOT Environmental, and then also open the public comment period. And then we'll have a 15-day public comment period for conformity assessment. And we have a week after that to address any public comments. And in the August 5th RRTPO Policy Board meeting, we'll ask for the approval of the final regional conformity assessment for submittal for Federal Highway. And then VDOT submits that to Federal Highway. 45-day federal review period begins, and based on the timeline, we have to have the federal conformity determination received by September 23rd. So this has to be done before the LRTP lapses. So the LRTP lapses on October 6th, 2021. So I think we are in good shape. That we would get the conformity determination by Federal Highway by September 23rd. So for the final plan approval, we would have the conformity determination received as well. So all other Evaluation would be done once the constraint list has been approved by the policy board. So we have things like the environmental justice assessment, including the accessibility assessment for the whole projects in the constraint plan, and then we have performance measures based on what changes would all the project as a whole would bring to the region. One of the things which we are doing is looking at the travel time changes in specific corridors. So we have identified 5-6 corridors in the region, and we'll be evaluating those corridors, any travel time change savings based on the implementation of the constraint plan projects. So all these would be eventually presented to the LRTP Advisory Committee in the future meetings. But for today, I think that's all I have. Is there any questions for the air quality conformity in general?
Well, thank you, Sulab, for that presentation. Since we don't have any other questions, it looks like this was the last agenda item for today's meeting. Do any members have any closing comments or things they want to say to the committee before we adjourn? All right, well, it looks like our next meeting will be July 22nd. So we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. Until then, thanks everyone for participating in all your work on this project.
Thank you. Bye.